Welcome everyone to the DRW page. I have Ellen Bashor here today. As you already heard, she's in her office space, and I think it's funny she's talking about White Claw. Maybe that's what we all want as professors right now, teaching online or whatever we're trying to do to navigate during these strange times. But I want to say thank you for being the first person to be interviewed on the DRW page. And this is something that I want to do moving forward, is talking with other early childhood professionals, environmental ed professionals, professors. I'm naming at least 3 things that Ellen is a part of, and she does so many other things. So without further ado, Ellen, could you do an introduction? Because I mentioned to you early on before we did the recording, I don't even know how to introduce her. I don't even know where to start. So I'm going to let her describe the roles that she's involved in.
That's fair, Dee. I forget all the time. I'm like, oh yeah, that too. Oh no, not that anymore. No. Hey everyone, I'm Ellen Bashor. I teach environmental education at Prescott College. I'm on the board of directors of the Arizona Association for Environmental Education and our Greater Prescott Outdoors Fund, which funds outdoor initiatives. And I am the education director of our community nature center here in Prescott, Arizona. Prescott, if there's any Prescottonians listening, make sure I get that right before they get me. So that's just some of those things that I do, along with a lot of community and family outdoor education and environmental education programming and outreach, and different things like that. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so I want to share how we met, because we met in January 2018, believe it or not. And those of you that may have been following me along the way, I have a podcast, and I've often mentioned Ellen and Sarah. This is the Ellen. This is who I'm talking about. Yes, it's her. And so we met because I was a student of Prescott College. And I've shared in the podcast like how disgruntled I was that I had to drive up there. But I will tell you, it's the best thing that ever happened in my life. But I'll never forget, because I'm the type of person, if I have to dive into something new, I tend to do my research. And so I'm like, there's this thing about Summer Institute and early childhood. Why have I never heard of this in my life? And I did my research, right? I had no idea when Ellen and Sarah presented that they were like the leaders of it. But once I figured out that they were the people, I'm like, I want to talk to them. I want to be able to like participate. And they were asking me to present, and I'm like, I'm just like barely in this.
No, we just met Dee, and we were just like, oh, you gotta come here and you gotta talk to us. This is fantastic.
So do you remember the first time we met and how that whole interaction went? I felt like I was still geeking out for days. I don't even know if you picked up on that vibe.
No, you totally have a cool vibe. Like your geeking vibe, I mean, it comes out, but it wasn't coming out there. We were like, okay, we're super professional. Here we are at our meeting. We're talking about planning and leadership things. But then, of course, we were like, hey, we're into all the same stuff. Let's change the world together.
Yes. And if it wasn't for meeting them, they offered me a scholarship to participate, and it was just like what changed my life. I say to people, I could never work with kids indoors because I know this philosophy about outdoor education because the Summer Institute. So I would like for you to share with people what you've been doing with the Nature Center through Prescott in your community, because I feel like that's a space that maybe other professionals, whether it's school districts, educators, communities, colleges, that they could really get behind, especially during these times of what we're going through. In this whole narrative of like children learning online versus outdoors, or maybe outdoors is not even a conversation, but I was so impressed with what you have been doing in your community. So could you share that?
Yeah, so it's a journey. So basically as was Dee mentioned, is that I was a program coordinator for our Center for Nature and Place at Prescott College for almost 4 years. And that was doing professional development for early childhood educators on how do you teach outside? What is nature-based learning? What does it mean to be place-based? Embedded in the local community, culture, the ecology of the local community, things like that. And then, of course, I'm teaching environmental education courses at the college. And through those, because our courses are very experiential and our students spend the majority of their courses in the communities, studying, doing service learning and research. Through that, I made a lot of connections with our local school districts, with a lot of other teachers. And, over the past about a decade here in Prescott, that's really shifted how I see my role in my community. And so as the pandemic happened, came on in, knowing with all of my connections with, the Arizona Association for Environmental Ed, where Dee is on the board with me, and a lot of those members of our organization work in Parks and Rec, work in schools, they work at colleges, they work in nature centers. I began to kind of think and look at what was out there in terms of resources and see what kind of resources we had in our community that could be leveraged to help our community in these really hard times. And so drawing on all of those, and the reason I'm kind of giving this backstory is because I just really want to give the credit to all of those people and all of those organizations that gave me the tools and resources and ideas to do that. I came up with this idea. And so I was going to just kind of part-time volunteer using our community nature center, which is an 18-acre open space preserve. It was originally from 1974 to 2006, a nature center that belonged to our school district, where the school district ran nature center programs. But in 2006, it was sold to the city of Prescott and has been relatively dormant for since then. So it's a beautiful little place. It's got a tiny little cabin built by our high school shop class. It's still in quite good condition. And so I saw this site and I'd run some classes there with my college students and was like, okay, there's a lot of potential in this site. It just needs a little love, and it could provide a support system right now for our school district, which has families who may not have internet at home, who may not have somewhere to go when the families are working and those kids need somewhere to be, or for teachers who want to feel a little safer, more comfortable, or even just simply utilize the outdoors for learning as we move back into hybrid. So this summer I started just kind of as a passion project, reaching out, doing some fundraising, talking to folks in our community, and basically just putting in some manual labor too to build some outdoor classrooms. And so we, through a lot of work with pruning and digging and chopping and whatnot, and again, shout out to all of the organizations and all of the people who stepped up to make this happen. We managed to build 2 outdoor classrooms, move a ton of curriculum and materials on site so that it's ready to go for anyone who needs to use it. And in early August, we started running some emergency care programming for our students' families that don't have somewhere to be. So this was during full distance learning mode. And for that month of full distance learning, our students were there 8 to 3 every day, in conjunction with the school that's next door. So our nature center is next to 2 public schools with about well over 1,000 students in kindergarten through 6th grade, all within about a 5 to 10 minute walk, depending on which school they're at, of our nature center. So it's really just an ideal location. It's too perfect to be passed up for a resource that I could help fix up with just my background and experience to share back with our schools. And so through that month, we had a mix of distance learning. We both have internet on site and at the schools. There were free breakfast and lunch for our qualifying students, free nurse care, and of course, free Chromebooks and Wi-Fi to just support those families who, again, majority do not have internet at home, do not have adequate meals at home, or do not have laptops or even a caring adult to be there. because of working conditions or whatnot. So that's our students who are with us, and they're in kindergarten through sixth grade. So we have a mix of them. They come, when we were in full distance learning mode, we had about anywhere between 25 and 30 students each day from 8 to 3. And then as we move to hybrid mode, and we continue offering this because our students are only in school either Monday, Wednesdays, or Tuesday, Thursdays, depending on their name, we're continuing to offer this every single afternoon for the students. And in the morning, they check in on their online classes. And that includes those meals for the full week. Fridays, since there's no school, Monday, our school district now runs Monday through Thursday. We have full Friday programming again. And all of this is just outdoor and environmental programming. A lot of it is teaching some basic concepts that are involved in, your ecological experiences outdoors. But at the core of all of that is really, really, really focusing on that social emotional learning and reintegrating some of those social skills that our kindergartners in our program had never been to school. So learning some of those core elements of how to share, how to, sit in a group and listen. And then they're older kids, like combating some of the social anxiety that developed over that really long period of not being around their peers. And so, yes, we're doing a lot of environmental education, and we're also really, really centered around finding support, stability, and safe spaces to move back into kind of a healthy social engagement with each other. Because a lot of our kids, as we all know as educators, young folks were not receiving maybe the same check-ins or the same kind of network of support that they might normally have during a school year. So we've been navigating that. And so as the school year started, yes, we're continuing our care models, but also there's been a huge, huge level of interest from teachers to teach outside, whether that's because they feel safer that way, because they want to give the students a chance to, when socially distanced and not moving, seated, have their masks off and be outdoors. Or they have seen the really high stress levels and some of those trauma indicators in the young people these days from being in a pandemic. Or they are stoked on outdoor environmental learning and integrating that into the sciences, into the mathematics. We have a sixth grade math class that does real life math mornings. So really supporting our educators so that they feel safe and they feel like their children's and their students' needs are addressed, that they can still do fun hands-on learning in a pandemic, that it doesn't have to be, a big burden to try something new. And then of course, continuing that safety. So what I like to kind of wrap that bundle up is like, this is bringing together what I think are two of the greatest assets in America, and that's our public lands and our public schools. And that kind of sector of support that's inherently more equitable. Yes. When it comes to having access to things like this. That's kind of where I see that intersection coming in.
Absolutely.
It's a long story. And then of course I'm teaching my college students who are brilliant future environmental educators, so I can hopefully get them all into doing what we do, Dee.
Yes.
Getting out there.
Like giving nothing but snaps and love, because everything that you described is what I would love to see happen in the community that I reside in. But I guess the question is, it sounds like you have to build those community relationships first. So, but this was like over the course of a decade. That's how you did it. So I think that's really interesting, keeping in mind that you have to start someplace.
Yeah, I would say like that those relationships really, really, really helped. But even more so with this specific project, it was the listening that happened at the beginning. So as an environmental educator, I would love to be like, oh, let's have an environmental education nature center. Everyone can come. We can talk about pollinators. We can talk about invasive species. We can talk about habitats. But when our educators are up to here with the standards they have to meet, up to here with liability and all of that, really I want to just listen. And even though I could do a programming that was, more in these fields, I wanted it to be where the teachers were, and then I can bring that outdoors in to meet them. So sometimes we're in the outdoors and maybe we're doing base 10s. Maybe we're in the outdoors and we're just looking at conjunctions and verbs or writing poetry that may not even be about nature. That's okay, because there's the other side of environmental ed, which is that benefit of simply having access to the outdoors and being in the outdoors. So yeah, it was really like knowing people was really, really important. But no matter where you are in your project, just listening first is really key.
Yes, I feel like recently I was asked to do a recording about like how did I get into this work, and especially as a former special needs preschool teacher, I had shared my story about how I had my students outside, and so the Green Schoolyards program or movement, they're doing. I'm a part of their working group and their framework and what they're trying to develop. Everything that Ellen is describing, there's going to be some sort of a framework that's put out there so people can progress forward in this work. But I was asked within the working group that I was in, could I do a recording about this? And so I did. It was really interesting just trying to piece together why and how, like what happened. And so I was just describing, like, I had a lot of behaviors with students, but I knew about this outdoor work because I'd been attending Summer Institute. And then finally I just said, we're going outside. And, I'm formally trained in early childhood education. I don't come from this world of environmental ed. I've just been learning by doing. And so I think the fact that you described, Ellen, that you just listen to people and you just help them understand, like, it's not about me teaching the kids about pollinating plants or anything like that. Sometimes it's just having access and being outdoors. And I feel like that's what I keep saying to people, is that it's just saying, go outside, teach whatever you were going to teach inside, but now you're just teaching it outdoors. You don't have to incorporate anything. You don't need to do anything, but just teach outside. And
Yeah.
so I think that's really important as
Yeah.
like environmental ed folks are diving into this work, or they're unsure, because I feel like there's a lot of people that are unsure, like, I'm not going to get it right. It's going to be wrong. What if it's too hot? What if it's this? And it's like, it's okay to just go outside. The kids are going
Yeah.
to get what they need out of it.
No, and it's so true, Dee. Like I see that once they're out there, then those other things become more natural. So
Yes,
maybe you did just go out there to do outdoor reading time, but then they want to read more about something they saw, or the
yes,
outdoor poetry does become poetry about nature,
yes,
or the question of what is that thing on the tree leads to a study of galls and the way in which galling happens.
yes,
There's that happens, but really, like what you're saying is so key, to just try being out there. And we can't ask that of our teachers alone. I mean, you had that like strength and that energy and that intention to go out there, but a lot of our teachers may have that and just have so much other stuff on their plate.
yes,
That's kind of the problem right now, is that we put way too much on our educators and we don't pay them enough and we don't give them the tools they need. And so really the whole focus of that was like, how can I take this weight off of those teachers? How
yes,
can I make a support system for those teachers who are already doing all this great work, so that they can maybe engage in some of the things that they want to be engaging in, but couldn't because they don't have time to build an outdoor classroom. They
mm-hmm,
don't have time to get all the supplies ready and cart it all out there and make sure that it's good to go before the kids get there. They don't have time to set up hand washing stations outdoors. Like, that's not their job. They
right,
shouldn't be doing that. That's a job that like a park ranger like myself could do.
right,
That's the kind of job that our support systems can then build, and teachers will come. They
right,
will. But they're
right,
not going to come if we go in and we say, here's this great curriculum, you should try it. There will
exactly,
be those few teachers, but then they have to rewrite their whole curriculum to integrate
yes,
it. They have to get the resources to do it. They have to remember all the stuff, and they have to remember that this goes with that. And I just think that in environmental education, whether it's early childhood or on up, if we start figuring out how we can be support systems rather than coming in with our agendas, that
right.
those things actually come back and meet us where we were with our goals in the first place.
Yes, meet people where they are at.
Yeah.
I feel like I say that all the time with students, with young kids, and maybe because I was trained as a special ed teacher.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We
Dude,
meet students where they're at.
remember, so what I've just been noticing is, so we have an inclusive program. So, we do have students in our program predominantly like mild to moderate. It's a good population, good portion of our population. But having worked with these students in the outdoors, so many of the things that are on their documents that, this is the thing to be aware of, so much of that has not been surfacing in the ways that I've seen it surface in similar situations in the past. I know I see your snaps because I want you to speak to that as a special education teacher.
Yes. I saw this happen pretty much within a month of taking my students outside. A lot of the goals goals that they had on their IEP goals, we were meeting them outdoors without purposely trying to make sure that they're working on their fine motor skills or working on their social emotional skills, adaptive needs. I'm just thinking of random different goals that we had, but it was just like suddenly those same goals were going from like high needs to like we were actually meeting the goals without me having to make a conscious effort to make sure that they meet that goal. That's why I keep saying I could never teach kids indoors, because the outdoors gave not just me as an educator, but like it gave the kids so much. And we can talk about the experience of kids being outdoors now versus before. Kids were not going outside for whatever reason, or maybe they didn't have the accessibility of going outdoors. But it's just like the outdoors can really be a healing place. And that's what I learned, and that's part of the reason why when the opportunity presented itself, why I started Outback Learning, because I'm like, I want kids to have accessibility to this. But even my narrative has adjusted and changed. I'm like, well, I don't want it to just be the kids that are in Outback. I really want all kids in my community to have access to the outdoors.
Yeah.
That's what I want. Ultimately, that is my biggest goal.
Well, and more than your community. I mean, with the work that you're doing, you're basically like, and our whole nation should have access to this if that's what they want. If that's what they want.
Exactly. And it's not, like you said, not just here, but that's why I advocate. That's why if there's an opportunity to be in a working group, and if I feel like it aligns with what I truly believe in, then I participate if I can. But that's how much I truly believe in it, that's what it boils down to. So I had another question for you, because you mentioned social emotional engagement. And the reason why I'm asking, because part of my background is that infant toddler mental health work too, or early childhood mental health work. And I'm just very curious, because you've actually had interaction with kids or with children. I've had very limited interaction. My interaction is with my 11-year-old. But I've been having small conversations with other educators, or whether they're formal or non-formal educators, and what the experience has looked like with kids going back. And so part of the conversations that we've had is like, do kids feel like they've had closure? Do the educators feel like they've had closure? Because I know like part of what's happening in many school districts is they're operating like this. And I say this because we're Zooming through a computer, but there are students that are reporting to school. They're still on the computer. The teacher is teaching the kids in front of the classroom, recording themselves for any of the students that are not coming to class. So you've got this hybrid online and in-person platform. And so I don't know if people realize like there's still an impact when you're not having access to the outdoors. There's still this social emotional impact of like, but you're still in this like safety box or bubble of like, well, you still have to do everything online. So I'm curious to see like, what was it like when the children first came back? What did it look like? I mean, and we can talk about ranges.
No, it's so true, because there wasn't closure, and I don't think we're going to get that.
Right.
but we do have new beginnings.
Mm.
And I mean, I just want to do a shout out to our district because they have listened and listened and listened so much to the community. And like the fact that this program, you know, the district just was like, yes, you know, let's formalize that intergovernmental agreement. Let's make sure this happens. Here's paras, you know, meals are showing up. Don't worry about it. You know, they just knew. And part of that was having a superintendent who's had experience with this and who knew,
Wow.
had seen what the outdoors does for lifting up children who may not otherwise find that kind of leadership and connection to their within their learning.
Yes.
But when they first came back, I mean, you know, from a teacher point, it was like they were awkward, you know, and it was almost as kind of heartbreaking as we saw them, you know, with our older kids that would really want adult leadership for what kind of activity they were doing. You know, it wasn't that they would ever pick a partner, you know, they would never they wouldn't talk during it. They would follow the directions because they were just so much, it wasn't about that peer interaction. I never had to say like, hey, you two, I'm giving directions right now. Can you stop chatting and just hang on to that until we come back? No, everyone was very quiet. I mean, and now we get a lot of redirects, you know, we're so excited to see each other. They know each other by name. But I mean, watching how we went from as in early childhood from parallel play, you know, just slowly, or even what was wild as the first few days of watching each other play, like kind of being
Oh,
like, oh, like they're building.
right.
I hadn't thought about building. I suppose and they'd like pick something up and just keep watching, you know, because
Wow.
especially for our kinders, you know, some of them may have gone to daycare, some may have gone to preschools, but the percentage of their life that was spent without that interaction with other children was immense in such a intense developmental period that watching them go through that reintegration into it, and now how they have these full conversations in imaginary worlds and just the richness of their relationships now.
Right.
But it was a process. You know, their first week for them, I think, felt kind of awkward.
Right.
And we did lots of name games and sharing about ourselves and partnering, socially distanced, so their masks and all.
Yeah.
But I think that it really had to be intentional. We couldn't just, you know, we didn't just do content areas. Those were thought out to be also socially engaging. And
Yes.
even now, though, I mean, we still, not knowing the students prior to our program, I don't know their developmental trajectory, but we have a lot of kind of individual regulatory challenges that happen throughout the day that we work through. And I've seen those positive changes happening over time. But, you know, just a few days ago, I had a teacher reach out to me saying, do you know anyone in our community who would come and do an outdoor thing around social emotional learning with my students? Because, and I mean, these are those older students who
Right.
even they're feeling a lot of social anxiety. They're feeling a lot of dysregulation in their ability to, with both their bodies and then in their thoughts, because, you know, primarily in this screen world, we are semi-self-directed.
Right.
You know, we are able to focus, not focus, interrupt, move, whatever. And so what does it look like to shift both back into kind of that self-regulatory system, you know, whatever intersubjectivity, the world of early democracy, and also though, make sure we meet them where they are, like coming back to that, which is they need those breaks right now more than ever. They need those social moments to chat more than ever.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's been really interesting. And I just like can't say enough about how important, no matter what your goals are, whether, you know, it was math or it was pollinators, you know, that those students, those skills come to the front of what you're doing right now, because you can really tell how much our young people need that.
Yes. That is such a good point. Thank you. Thank you. And I think I asked you about getting started in doing this type of work, what would you say to someone that doesn't necessarily have the community connections? They're just like brand new to their community. Maybe they're familiar with outdoor learning already, and they realize like there's nothing like this happening in their community. What would you suggest or recommend for them moving forward?
Yeah, really finding your allies. If you're a teacher, reaching out to Parks and Rec, reaching out to Game and Fish, reaching out to these outdoor or environmental kind of agencies that are around you, whether it's city parks, state parks, whoever manages your open space, Bureau of Land Management, if that's near you. And don't be discouraged, because I mean, you know this in your own school. Like there's your allies within your school, and there's the folks who aren't going to be budged. They're going to do whatever they were going to do.
Right.
So if the first person you call isn't stoked, maybe you call the outreach office. They're not into it. But then you call the land management, or you call the coordinator, or try around, because when you find an ally within an organization, they have the connections to shift those organizational resources. So like as a teacher, really reaching out to those organizations, and keep looking and keep poking around. And second, as one of those organizations, I would say pause your agenda, because it's going to be there and it's going to happen, and think about your teacher's needs. Can you get a hold of some small outdoor whiteboards? Can you give every kid a clipboard? Can you have that ready for them? Yes, you can offer them space, but what else can you do to make that seamless? Can you go fix up something on their campus? Can you find a space nearby? Can you figure out the logistics of getting there for them? There's a lot that goes into that, and any of that you can do, and lay that before your teachers and say, hey, here we go. And checking with them, like, yeah, is this what you need before you do it? Those other things, like more kids in parks, or kids into conservation, or, changing your voter base, whatever it is, it'll happen. But by meeting people where they are in a time of need, you may find more ways your organization can be successful. And you'll have people be your allies down the road.
Absolutely. All right. So I guess I just need final thoughts from you. What are your final thoughts? What's your conclusion?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say that really my conclusion is to not forget the disparities that exist currently, and that are from long historic and systemic practices of intentionally excluding people from these types of programs and these types of spaces and these resources, and be really aware of how that's affected people that you're working with. It's not simply enough to say, hey, I want to work in this school because it's Title I, so I can help people who are from a certain demographic.
Right.
There's a lot more that goes into that with really, really listening. Are there certain cultural things that you need to be aware of? Is there some mending and healing that needs to happen? And really, really thinking about your investments, because maybe it's really easy to get your private school or your charter school to do outdoor learning. But is that really also combating that historical, those historical systems, around privilege and oppression, which are foundational to the success of a program? So if you continue on that trajectory, if there's that we've seen in environmental education, which is serving predominantly middle to upper class kind of white communities, make sure that when you do this, and make sure that when you're addressing these things, that forefront is, what does it mean for this to be equitable? Not what does it mean for this to be easy?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Ellen.
Yay!
Thank you for being my first interviewee. I hope I'm saying that right, for the DRW page. I'm quite sure we will have another time where I will talk with you.
Yeah, we have so much to talk about, Dee, because we run so many shows. This is like one bus I'm on. But like we've got another bus we're on together too. So
Yes, yes. I'm sure we'll do other things because, like Ellen said, we're both on the board of directors for Arizona Association for Environmental Ed. I'm on the membership and marketing group with her as well. She leads that committee.
it's a community. It is.
Sounds like a community. And we're also, I know I'm going to mess this up because I say this to Lorianne all the time. I'm in the underrepresented committee. Like I'm a part of that with AAE, but also we're working on the other big project with AAE.
Oh, for the underrepresented, the story, the voices.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, y'all are doing so much good stuff in there. I'm excited for the whole of those blogs to come out and read
Yes,
those.
yes. But anyways, I just can't thank you enough. And like I said, I'm sure we'll do this again. And in whatever way, if you have something that you're like, hey, can I put this out? Can I come to the DRW page? You're welcome anytime. Anytime you want to share something. So, all right. Until next time, friends, continue to be blessed in nature. Bye,
Thanks, Dee.
Ellen. Thanks.
Bye.